So let me start. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Innal hamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. To proceed, brothers and sisters and friends, I greet you with the warmest Islamic greetings of peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today's discussion, talk, advice is on the book that shook the world. And of course, from an Islamic perspective, this is referring to the Quran. Muslims believe that the Quran is the eternal divine word of God, of Allah. And we believe this was revealed to Muhammad, upon whom be peace, in the 7th century Arabia. So we believe as Muslims that this book has been sent down for our guidance, the guidance of the whole of humanity. And we believe this book indeed shook the world. And I'm going to present to you an array of arguments or an array of perspectives on why I believe and why Muslims believe that this book actually shook the world. The first point I want to talk about is a historical point. Now, 1400 years ago, there was a man named Muhammad, upon whom be peace. And before he reached the age of 40, he was quite upset with his situation. What I mean by upset is that when he looked at the 7th century Meccan society, he wasn't happy with it. There was injustice, there was misogyny, there was oppression, there was economic oppression, there was an elitist society, there was the burying of the firstborn daughters alive, there was the mistreatment of orphans. So you could see that the picture being painted here was one of darkness. So Muhammad, upon whom be peace, he was not very happy with that situation. So what he used to do is retreat in a cave. And he used to ponder, reflect, meditate, and think about his internal reality and the external reality around him. After he reached the age of 40, and when he was in this cave, he heard a voice. What did he hear? He heard the words, Iqra, read, recite, proclaim. And the Prophet Muhammad, upon whom be peace, said, Ma ana biqari'in. I am not a reciter. I am not a reader. But the voice said again, Iqra. Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. Read in the name of your Lord who created. So obviously Muhammad, upon whom be peace, being a human being, what did he do? He ran down the mountain, run out of the cave, and he went to his beloved wife Khadija, may Allah be pleased with her. And what did he say? Zammiluni, zammiluni, cover me, cover me. I fear for my nafs, I fear for myself. Because he thought he was going mad, or he thought that there was something wrong happening to him. And what did his wife say? Khadija, may God be pleased with her. She said, no, God has not forsaken you. You're a good person. You take care of the orphans. You feed the poor. You're trustworthy. You bring people together. And this essentially was the beginning of Revelation. This amazing story. Every time I hear it, I still get excited. It's an amazing story, and this was the beginning of Revelation. But these first few words, Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. Read in the name of your Lord who created. These first few words, brothers and sisters and friends, they form the basis of a book, the Quran, Al-Kitab, the book, Kitabullah, the book of God. It formed the basis of this book, which not only shook the world, but the way it structured itself in the Arabic language, really convinced the hearts and minds of the Arabs. Because Karen Armstrong, the popular historian, she says, if it wasn't for the new literary form of the Quran, if it wasn't for this new structuring of the Arabic language, Islam would have not taken root. And this is very important to understand. That the Arabic language in the Quran, the way it's structured, really convinced the hearts and minds of these Arabs. And this is why Karen Armstrong, she states, if it wasn't for this new literary structure, this new literary form, Islam would have not taken root. So the Quran convinced the Arabs of the time, intellectually and emotionally. It convinced the mind and it gave the heart some tranquility. So what happened was, now these Arabs who used to eat lizards, and they were almost an unknown civilization. The Persians didn't want to go and invade. It was too hot. The Romans, they thought they got nothing to gain. It was like the ashtray of the world. And these people were relatively primitive and backward. But look what the Quran did. Within 23 years, one man and one book, they actually spread the teachings of this book, which is essentially is peace, justice, and harmony, across the whole world. Across the whole world, within 80 years of the death of the Prophet Muhammad, upon whom be peace, they went to Multan, which is Pakistan, and they were in Spain. And interestingly, it was 82 years after the death of the Prophet, upon whom be peace, where they decided to fix the mosque of the Prophet. Which shows that Islam is not about buildings, it's about people of substance. So this Quran changed these people. And they took Islam from Spain to Pakistan to China. Why? Because you think they wanted people's blood? This old Orientalist cliche. You know, Muslims, they like the taste of non-Muslim blood. It's the gourmet blood, right? This was wrong. You have an artistic French critic. His name is Jean-Jacques Levesque. He says people think that the Muslims took over the world because they wanted the blood of the infidel. But he said no, it's because they were inspired by this book. Not only to spread peace, justice, and harmony, but also they wanted to know what was beyond the horizons. Because doesn't the Quran say, and we shall show you our signs in the horizons and in themselves until they know that this is the truth? So when Islam spread as a result of this book, as a result of this unique literary form that inspired the Arabs, spreading this message of Islam around the world, look what they achieved. They indeed achieved peace, justice, and harmony. And this is not a crazy, mad mullah talking to you now. I'm going to quote you academic references from the Western tradition, not the Eastern tradition, to make you understand that this is what the Quran achieved as a result of inspiring a people. Take the Jews, for example. There's a Jewish historian called Amnon Cohen. He wrote the book, A World Within. It's actually a 2-volume book, A World Within. He collected 1,000 judicial records of the Ottoman period, the Uthmani Khilafah, the Ottoman Caliphate, the Islamic Empire, if you like. And he did an analysis, and he said, although the Jews and the Christians were free, they had judicial authority, they were free to go to their rabbis and their priests. But he states the majority of the time they wanted to go to the Qadi, which means the Islamic judge. because they knew justice and harmony was at the feet of Islam. This is why Professor Bullier from Columbia University, he asserts exactly the same thing. He says justice was meted out impartially, irrespective of religion, gender, social status, and other demographic variables. We have another Jew, Zion Zohar. He says, thus when the Muslims, they crossed the Straits of Gibraltar in the Iberian Peninsula, the Jews saw the Muslims as liberators from Christian persecution. We have another academic work published by Routledge, by A.S. Tritton. He wrote Omar and his non-Muslim subjects. And he quotes that the Christians preferred Muslim rule to that of the Franks. We have another Jewish historian, Heinrich Geitz, 19th century Jewish historian. He said that the Jews lived favorably under the Mohammedans, the Muslims. We have a primary source, a letter, in a book called Constantinople, written by the historian Philip Mansell. He quotes the rabbi in 1453, and what does the rabbi say? Come to the land of the Turks, the land of the Muslims, rich of the fruits of the earth. We live in peace and freedom, and we're not oppressed with heavy taxes. This was the reality of Islam, people. And you may think, oh, this was a historical accident. This is no historical accident. It's as a result of the values that inspired these people, and those values came from where? The Quran, Islam. And that's how the Quran shook the world, because no one knew this type of justice before. No one knew this type of peace and convivencia, this coexistence, as Islamic Spain has been described. And that's why the Quran says 3 times, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُقْسِطِينَ. Indeed, God loves the just. And we have an array of verses and prophetic traditions that talk about justice, fairness, impartiality. Take Islamic Spain as an example, as we're still discussing this historical element to our argument. Islamic Spain, when it was taken over by the Muslims, it created an unprecedented environment, where the academics call it a convivencia, which means a coexistence. And what happened is that you had Jews, Christians, Muslims, and other people living in harmony under a tranquility. And that tranquility facilitated all of them to look into the interconnecting principles of nature. And this is why Professor Thomas Arnold, in his book, A Preaching of Islam, he argues that if it wasn't for this convivencia, if it wasn't for this coexistence in Islamic Spain, you wouldn't have the milestone which facilitated European Renaissance. Not my words, Professor Thomas Arnold's. And if you never had the Renaissance, you wouldn't have the iPhone. You wouldn't have the iPad. This is why I always argue that Muslims, they should go to the Apple store and they should demand a free iPhone and a free iPad. Because if it wasn't for Islamic Spain, then they wouldn't have any of this. So you see, from this historical perspective, brothers and sisters and friends, the Quran shook the world. Now, sometimes I have discussions with Tom Holland on Twitter. And Tom Holland, he's what I would call a revisionist. He tries to have a different angle on Islamic history. It's his right. But he says that Europe wasn't influenced by the Quran. It didn't shake the world in the way that I think and others think. Because they knew nothing about Islam. They just knew Arab culture at that time. But then I argued with him and said, but Arab culture came from where? It came from the Quran. Arab values at that time came from the Quran. So the link is direct. Quran, Arab culture, and the Renaissance, if you like. And then he changed the subject on Twitter. But the point I'm trying to say is, no matter what kind of intermediary you put into this historical discussion, it will always end in the Quran because it had such a great influence. So this is the historical argument. This was the first argument on how the Quran shook the world, the book that shook the world. This was the historical one. The second point I would like to add is that the Quran shakes our world. Yes, it shook the world from an external perspective, but it shakes our internal world from a spiritual perspective. Why am I saying this? Because if you engage with the Quranic discourse, as the Quran says, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنِ, do they not reflect upon the Quran, or are there locks upon their hearts? Meaning, the more reflection you do, the more you engage with this discourse, your heart becomes unlocked to receive the light, guidance and mercy of God. And the Quran says connect with this book. And this reminds me when I converted to Islam around 10 or 11 years ago. And when I first read the Quran, I was like, who the hell wrote this? Who the hell wrote this book? What an arrogant so-and-so. That's what I really thought. But actually, when I was pointing the finger, 3 fingers were pointing back. Because it was shaking my internal world. It was shaking my disposition. It was murdering my ego. As I always say that you should never murder anyone. You should murder your ego. We don't do homicide. We do ego-cide. But it's so true. And that's how the Quran shakes our world if we engage with it. Because the biggest barrier to God's mercy, love, light, and guidance is the ego. The nafs. And the way to beat it, to kill it, to do ego side, is to listen to what the Quran has to say and allow the medicine, although bitter at first, just like me 10, 11 years ago, it eventually works. So how does the Quran shake the world? Shake our world, the ego world, in order for us to come closer to God? Well, it reminds us who we were first and foremost. Allah says we're a nutfa. Nutfatin min maniyin. We're like a drop of fluid from a semen, from a despised fluid. If you had that fluid on your hand at the moment, you'd be like, ugh, you want to wash it away. But God reminds you of your lowly beginning. This should be on your Facebook profile. Yeah, semen should be on your Facebook profile because you were that junk. You were that junk and now you think you're someone special. That you could come late to my lecture. Joking. You think you're someone special. But you had these lowly beginnings. And you think you're independent and free and absolutely free. But who formed you from that? Who created you from that? Who sustained you from that? You know, there's a saying that we say in Hackney. I'm from the streets in Hackney originally in the 1980s. We would say, who made you from this? You idiots. Yeah? Because some people are stupid. They think they're so self-sufficient and independent and it's all about me now. So God reminds us of our lowly and humble beginnings. And then the Quran also talks about the life cycle of the human being. Yes, you were this despised fluid, but you are also a baby. A baby! Reflect on a baby, people. Don't be stupid. Reflect. A baby can't even lift its neck up. You take a newborn child, you say, stand up. Stand up! No, it can't do anything. You say feed yourself, go to work. Babies can't feed themselves. You say to the baby, wipe your own backside. A baby can't wipe its own backside, can't lift its neck up, can't even feed itself. And that was you. That was me. But now we think we're the rude boy, yeah? We think we're someone like, strong and independent. As if we are who we are because of us, not because of anything outside of ourselves. This arrogance. And that's the medicine working. That's the Quranic medicine to shake the world, our internal world. And then the Quran also mentions كُلُّ نَفْسٍ ذَائِقَةَ الْمَوْتِ. Every soul is going to taste death. You're going to taste it, bruv. You are. You're going to taste death. Death is inevitable. You will become worm buffet. Don't think you're going to live forever. And I'm telling you, sometimes we act as if we're going to live forever. And that's the ego again. Thinking you're self-sufficient, free, eternal. And there are many other spiritual strategies in the Quran that really shake our internal world so we can start thinking about our life. But I think if you just focus on these three, that is the beginning of guidance. Because it's going to help you commit ego-side. Kill the ego. Remember where you came from. A lowly drop of semen. Remember that you were a baby. You were so needy of others. You couldn't even wipe your own backside, lift your neck up. You couldn't even feed yourself. And don't forget, you're going to become worm buffet. So that's how the Quran shakes our internal world. So two things we've discussed so far. How the Quran shook the world from a historical perspective, peace, justice and harmony. How the Quran shakes our internal world. Now, let me tell you how the Quran shakes the mental world, the intellectual world. The Quran has been described as a very intrusive text. Yeah, it's an imposing text. Read it. As I said, when I read it 10, 11 years ago before I turned Muslim, I was upset that such a book existed. I was like, no. Because the medicine was working. The Quran imposes itself in a very positive way. And the way it does that, it seeks to positively engage with the aql, with the intellect, and with your heart, with your psychology, your nafsiyya, your internal disposition. And the way the Quran achieves this is by asking questions. Sometimes it doesn't even give you answers, just ask you questions. وَفِي أَنفُسِكُمْ أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ. And in themselves, do they not see? أَوْلَمْ يَتَفَكَّرُوا فِي أَنفُسِهِمْ. Do they not reflect and ponder within themselves? وَكَذَلِكَ نُفَصِّلُ الْآيَاتِ لِقَوْمٍ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. And thus do explain our signs in detail for those who reflect. The word يَتَفَكَّرُونَ comes from the triliteral stem فَكَرَى, which doesn't mean just reflect like a desert romantic, sitting back on the deck chair, looking at the stars, touching the sand, writing poetry to your beloved and sipping a glass of milk. Just to make it Islamic, because we don't drink. It's not that type of reflection. It's a type of reflection that the thing that you're meditating upon, inquire deeply about the implication. What does it mean that there's a beginning to the universe? Don't stop there. You know there's a beginning, but what does it mean? What does it mean that you have internal subconscious experiences? You know you have them, but what does it mean? And the ultimate answer is that there is a divine reality that deserves to be worshipped. But the Quran not only makes you think, but it goes further than this. It challenges mankind with regards to its authorship. Challenge, intellectual challenge. Not believe in me because I said so. Not believe in me because just have faith. We don't have a concept of faith in Islam. It's called iman, which comes from the root word to feel secure, not insecure. Just have faith. Just close your eyes and take the next step. No. We have security in our belief. And the Quran challenges us. In the 2nd chapter, verse 23. وَإِن كُنْتُمْ فِي رَيْبٍ مِّمَّا نَزَلْنَا عَلَىٰ عَبْدِنَا فَأْتُوا بِسُورَةٍ مِّن مِّثْلِهِ وَادْعُوا شُهَدَاءَكُم مِّن دُونِ اللَّهِ إِن كُنتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. And if you're in doubt about this book, we have sent down to our servant, referring to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, upon whom be peace, then bring one chapter like it and call on your witnesses and your supporters besides God if you're truthful in your claim. This is not empty rhetoric. It's not sophistry. It's profound. It's saying, go on. You don't believe this is from the divine reality? Go for it. Challenge me. What a bold claim. Now this opens an array of arguments to show the miraculous nature of the Quran. But I just want to focus on one. And to start, I want to talk about Greece. Who's been to Greece before? Only one person. You're not allowed to engage in this discussion, just for now. So most of you haven't been to Greece, my home country. Oh, my parents' home country. This is my home country. I was born in Hackney, in London, in the ghetto, in the 80s, right? My parents are from Greece. They're ethnically Greek. Which really proves God exists, because how can someone looking Pakistani come from Greek parents? It must be a miracle. So I'm walking proof of God's existence because it's a miracle. You're like a Pakistani, mate. Yeah? Anyway, who believes Greece exists? Put your hand up. You are the most lazy students, man. Look what one sister did, right? Yeah, I mean, come on, let's just be passionate here. I'm trying to wake you guys up. So everybody believes Greece exists, right? Prove to me exists. Prove to me. I want evidence. Prove to me Greece exists. Just throw out anything that comes to your mind. Google Maps. Good. If I gave you 2015 version of Google Maps, and you saw an island the shape of a diamond in the Pacific Ocean, and it said, this is the island of Fufula, would you believe Google Maps? Yes. That's because you're brainwashed and stupid. No offense, bro. But this is the point. Just because you have a map telling you that something exists, how is that proof? Empirical proof. It's just testimony. You're believing the say-so of others. So I want proof. Give me proof that Greece exists. You saw it on TV. So if I showed you talking monkeys on TV, you believe there's talking monkeys. That's still testimonial. That's not your empirical evidence. You have to believe that, by the way, this is a TV show in Greece. You just believed his testimony. Let's go to Greece. Okay, have you been there? No, but you believe in Greece now. I'm starting to doubt it. You're starting to doubt it, exactly. I want proof, people. Where is the proof? In the history. So someone wrote a book. So if I write a book that all Bengalis are from Venus, does it mean Bengalis are from Venus? Some brother said yes. He must be Bengali then. Right? Do you see my point? Do you get my point, guys? So where's your proof? But you believe in it to be true. The reason we believe it to be true is because there is a valid source of knowledge called testimony. If you study philosophy, study epistemology, which is the study of knowledge, you see there are some sources of knowledge. One of them include testimony, the say-so of others. But this testimony has to be authentic and valid. The reason I believe Greece exists, okay, yes, I've been there before, but say I didn't, is because so many different people that never met each other have claimed to have gone to Greece and they have experienced the same kind of things. Now, to claim they're all wrong is to claim a mass conspiracy. So testimony, the say-so of others, if it's authentic and valid, is a valid source of knowledge. Now you may think, why on earth is Hamza talking about Greece, but he's supposed to be talking about the Quran? Well, here's the link, bruv. The link is this. If you walk out of this room rejecting the Quran, it's equivalent of rejecting the existence of Greece. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. Let me tell you why. Because there is authentic and valid testimony that no one has been able to successfully reproduce the structural arrangement and features and nature of the Arabic language in the Quran. This is authentic and valid testimony. And you don't have to know anything about the Arabic language. You don't even need to know what it looks like. So if this is authentic and valid testimony, then we could draw 4 logical conclusions. Number 1, it came from an Arab. Number 2, it came from a non-Arab. Number 3, it came from the Prophet Muhammad, upon whom be peace. Number 4, it came from God. Let's discuss these together. Could it have come from an Arab? Well, this is impossible. Because the best Arabs are expressing themselves in the Arabic tongue, that were defined as Arabic linguists par excellence, the 7th century Arab. They failed to reproduce the Quran. They failed to reproduce its inimitable features, its features that cannot be matched from a linguistic and literary perspective. This is why even the best poet of the time, Walid ibn al-Mughira, he says, by God, this can't come from a human being. I'm the best at expressing themselves in the Arabic tongue, but sorry, I can't do it. They failed. And there's a historical precedence for this, as the Arab historian Ibn Rashid, he states that there was a socialization that encouraged linguistic excellence. As he quotes, that the Arabs would celebrate 2 things in the 7th century Arabia. Number 1, the birth of a boy. Number 2, when a poet rose amongst them. Now you may think, well, surely some Arabs have attempted to challenge the Quran. That's true, but they failed. For example, one failure is in the works of Musaylima, the liar, he was known, because he was like a false prophet claiming prophethood. And he would recite some type of poetry and prose, like, Ya wabar, oh wabar, which is like this furry animal that does digging in the sand. And many commentators like Ibn Kathir and Al-Baqilani and many others have deconstructed his work and says, this is nothing compared to the Quran. But that's a technical point. Now someone may argue, what about today's Arab? Today's Arab. Well, think about this. Think about this principle. If the people of speciality failed, then how can the people of non-speciality succeed? Right? If I gave you a challenge to do, for example, there's this exercise called a burpee. You know what a burpee is? It's like a press up with a jump squat and you're jumping up in the air at the same time. If I said to you, do 60 burpees in 1 minute, right? And I challenged the best athletes of the world, and they couldn't do it, it would be a very poor argument to say, well, I reckon some obese people in Texas could do it. Right? The reason I'm mentioning Texas because America suffers from obesity. Not the whole of America, obviously, but there's a crisis. I think Qatar just recently beat the Americans on obesity. The Qataris, yeah. It's all that oil and money, you see. They don't know where to put the gas. So, My point here is the people of speciality, if they fail, then the people of non-speciality can't succeed. The 7th century Arab was the specialist. Today's Arab is not the specialist, so they would fail. In a more technical way, the Arab in the 7th century came from a homogeneous linguistic environment, meaning that there wasn't too much linguistic borrowing, so the natural expression was eloquent. But today's Arab, although he can access the Quranic Arabic and the classical Arabic, he doesn't have this kind of intuitive, responsive way of producing this type of natural eloquence from a classical Arabic perspective, because his culture is a heterogeneous culture, meaning too much linguistic borrowing. There's been linguistic degeneration of the Arabic language over time. Just go to Iraq and go to some villages and find out how to say chocolate. Do you know what they say? Nestele. From Nestle. Go to Egypt and pick up the phone. They will say telephone, television, the television. So we could safely say it couldn't be today's Arab either. The next option, could it be from a non-Arab? Well, the Quran even addressed this. They say that this book is from someone whose tongue is foreign. And Ibn Kathir, the classical commentator, he says, what a stupid argument, essentially. Well, he didn't use the word stupid, of course, but I'm just contemporizing what he said. He's saying it's beyond common sense. It's ridiculous. So the third option, maybe it came from Muhammad, upon whom be peace. Well, the first logical answer is, well, he was an Arab too. And all Arabs failed, so how can he produce it? And he was not known to engage in eloquence and the cultivation of poetic skill. But I think there are some strong arguments to further show that it couldn't have come from the Prophet Muhammad, upon whom be peace. Number one, take psycholinguistics as an example. Who does psychology in this room? If I said who does economics, I bet everyone puts their hands up, yeah? Who does economics? This is a university, right? Oh, you do pharmacy? Oh, typical Daisies, man. So, psycholinguistics is basically looking at the text, dissecting it, and deriving some kind of psychological, emotional character from it. Now in psycholinguistics, when you read a particular text, you know the author. So when they read Shakespeare, they know this is from Shakespeare because there's a characteristic, there is a psycholinguistic profile of Shakespeare. Similarly, you could do this with any text. Do it with the Quran. But the analysis you will find is that the Quran is in the divine voice. This is almost psycholinguistically impossible because the Prophet Muhammad, upon him be peace, suffered a 23-year prophetic career of an emotional roller coaster. His children passed away, his wife passed away, he was stoned by children for hours in a city in Arabia, in a town in Arabia. He was boycotted, abused, tortured. His beloved companions were tortured. He engaged in warfare. But none of those emotions are found in the Quranic discourse from a psycholinguistic perspective. Another argument that can't come from Muhammad, upon whom be peace, is that, think about it. Every human expression, if you have the blueprint, you should be able to reproduce it. Take this piece of artwork as an example. If you have the blueprint, you can replicate it. And we know this with the works of Picasso. There are so many replicas of Picasso. As long as they have the original with them, they could see it. They know the brush strokes, the texture, the canvas, the materials used, they can emulate it. Every human expression is like that. But the Quran, its blueprint is alive and well 1400 years on today. But we can't use that blueprint to emulate it or reproduce it. It's inimitable, matchless. Therefore, it can't be human expression, because every human expression, if you have the blueprint today, you should be able to emulate it or challenge it. So from this perspective, it couldn't have come from Muhammad, upon whom be peace. Therefore, it must have come from God. You see how simple that is? And if you reject this today, it's like rejecting that China exists. Because it's based on authentic and valid testimony and you're just drawing logical conclusions. Make sense? So brothers and sisters and friends, In these 40 minutes, I've discussed 3 things on how the Quran shook the world. And there are many more things to discuss. We could be here for 12 hours. But I don't want to bore you to death. And we should engage in some question and answers. The first point was the historical point, argument, that the Quran indeed shook the world with regards to peace, justice and harmony. The second point was it shakes the internal world. It allows you and facilitates ego side, to kill the ego. And we discuss what Quranic strategies are in the Quran that help us do that so we could receive the light and guidance and mercy of God. And the final point, that it shakes our intellect. It shook the minds of man because no one can challenge it. And also, if you reject it, it's like rejecting the existence of China. And I would even argue it's like rejecting your mother gave birth to you. Because you don't have any physical evidence that she really gave birth to you. And don't even say you got a DNA certificate in your bedroom. You don't, but you still believe she gave birth to you. And you have only 3 testimonies. Your father, the midwife, and your mother. And 2 of them you don't really trust. The midwife and your father. Do you see my point? So if you reject this testimony, which is authentic and valid, then it's like rejecting your own mother's. So if you reject this book, call your mom and be honest. Have integrity and say, Mom, I've just rejected the Quran, so I have to reject that you gave birth to me. May God bless you guys. I'm ending it here. I've enjoyed myself, as you can tell. And let's continue with the question and answers with the Islamic ethic, where the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the cure to ignorance is to ask and learn. In this light, let's proceed. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.